What is up, people of YouTube? I'm your host Vernon. This is Sunset Park. Let's fish that. Alright, ladies and gents, we're already in the middle of May and the fishing has been quite strange this year. By this time we should already have some stockings of some channel catfish, maybe some bluegill, but instead, because of all the rain and storms and lower water temperatures, they actually recently stocked a few trout. So the fishing here has been a bit strange, but typically this would be the time of the year when the carp in the ponds are done with their spawn and should be start feeding. And when it comes to carp, I've caught many carp before, but I don't actually think I've ever caught a big carp here from Sunset Park. And that brings me to my main focus out here. Yes, we're going to have some plains and we're going to have some ducks, but the idea is spending some time out here seeing if I can get on some carp. Now, normally in my videos, I select what type of fish I want to go for. I go out there, spend a couple of hours, and either we catch them or we don't, and that's the video. But this video is going to be a tad bit different. Rather than giving myself a couple of hours, I'm rather going to give myself a couple of days, something like 1 or 2 days, to see if I can catch any carp out there. But for now, let's get set up and start fishing. Alright, so it is 90 degrees out and it's almost going to hit 100 degrees today. So it's very hot out there, which is rather weird to see this much trout still up shallow. Right here next to the bank we have a little trout. This little guy is hiding from some birds or something, and seeing quite a lot of trout swimming around, coming by every once in a while. But as I said, the main focus is going to be the carp. Now, should the carp be post-spawn or pre-spawn, they would be feeding. During spawn, the carp completely stop feeding. We have a big carp koi cross swimming past here. If all the carp are cruising around like that, they're most likely still busy with their spawn, but we'll see. That's what we're out here to test. Now, I got my rod out there, and the general idea is we want to get all the baits in the same location over and over, creating a little feeding zone, drawing the fish that are willing to feed into that zone. Now, of course, I don't own this particular spot, but I'm going to try over the next 2 days to get this particular spot so we can keep on throwing the baits in the exact same spot. Now, on this rod, we have my pack bait and corn. I'll talk and show a bit more of the pack bait and stuff later in this video, but we got that out there and we're going to try and get it in the same spot over and over again to see if they're willing to feed on that. Now, of course, seeing all of this trout around, I'm allowed a second rod. I was thinking of throwing out some night crawlers, seeing for some catfish or something. But seeing as I'm seeing all these trout, we might try for some of the trout. Unfortunately, I didn't bring any of my trout gear out here, but we'll see if we can perhaps find something we can try and catch up trout on. That's just going to be something completely different to keep me busy while we're waiting for the baits to soak out there, see if any carp are willing to feed. Now, the general idea of this is we're throwing the baits out, we're leaving them out there for a while. You want as much bait kind of chumming the area out there so that we draw in fish and they start a feeding frenzy and grab your hooks. That's what we're hoping for. Alright, so because I wasn't expecting to do some trout fishing, I don't really have the correct gear. I'm going to be using my ugly stick, and on that we have 12 pounds test line. Now, that's way too big to be doing trout fishing, but that's what I have with me today, so we're going to give that a whirl. Now, I did manage to find one little tube, and we got a little drop shot weight on there. It's going to be drop shotting this little tube. Let's see if we can get some of these trout. Even though that's not the main focus for this video, when you have something like this where some fish are offered to you on a platter, you kind of need to try and get those fish. Alright guys, our first little fish. Quite a decent sized little trout. Nice sized trout, not keeping any fish today. Unfortunately, I'm in the shade at the moment. Let's get him back to the water. And off he goes. Couldn't get a nice look of him because we're in the shade. These fish are schooling together in the shade. That's where I'm targeting them at the moment. And I'm simply just using a tiny little plastic fish imitation, moving it in the water to see if I can get them to strike. Been getting a lot of hits but missing them. Finally managed to get one. Obviously we're not using the right gear for this type of fishing, but we use what we can and got a fish. Alright, so for 2 hours now I had the bait soaking out there and I had a couple of ducks steal my bait, but no action from any fish. Now that kind of tells me that the waters are cold enough for the trout to still be feeding, then it's probably too cold for these carp to spawn. That means these fish should be pre-spawn, they might feed, and I'm seeing quite a lot of them up shallow here while trying to find some of the little trout. I'm seeing quite a lot of carp up in the shallows. So rather than fishing the deeper water or the drop off into deeper water, I'm moving the baits up shallow, seeing if I can cast them in between where I'm seeing some of this carp. Let's see if we'll get lucky. Maybe they'll start feeding on my baits up shallow rather than in deep. I don't think the fish are in deep. They seem to be patrolling around, waiting for the right temperatures. Now that is changing the plan, but because the circumstances are so different, I think it's best if we do that. Now I'm struggling to find a place where I can get my rod holder into the ground here. This ground is very hard, so I have a little makeshift setup here where we're using the pole holder and I have a little piece of line, just making sure that my rod doesn't get pulled into the water. We'll wait for something to happen on that while I'm going to be casting around with the other rod. Alright, so a lot of my time is going to be spent sitting around waiting for some fish to show up. Now of course I'm seeing a lot of fish, but just because you're seeing fish doesn't mean that it's feeding fish. But because I'm going to be sitting around, I thought it's a good time to talk about some things. Now in the first place, why use a method feeder? Why not just chum the water? Well, you can chum the water, especially a spot like this. If you throw out corn right here, you get the fish all ready to feed. If you just throw out one single piece of corn out there, you are less likely to catch fish. It's when there's a lot of corn and it gets them in a feeding frenzy, that's when you get to catch them. And that's the idea of a method feeder. That's something you can throw out and chum in a specific area. You can only throw corn that far, so having a method feeder, you can cast out way more. Now when it comes to method feeders, what style of method feeder is the best? Do you go for a little plastic one or a little wire mesh one? Maybe one of these cockroach looking little method feeders? To be honest, it doesn't matter which type of method feeder, as long as you have a good pack bait that you put on there, something like the oats and corn and jello mixture, or there are all sorts of different varieties of pack baits you can use. A good pack bait is all you need. The look and feel of the actual method feeder is not that important. I'm saying that because I've caught more fish using a wire one, but I've caught bigger fish on the plastic one, and it doesn't seem to matter which one you use. Now again, I'm considered a novice when it comes to carp fishing, so I don't really know whether the one is better than the other. I'm just telling you what I found in my experience. I don't think the actual shape of the method feeder makes any difference. Now normally when I tie on my little method feeders, I will have 2 hooks on there. That's just because I grew up using 2 hooks, but you always need to check your regulations. For instance, in Lake Mead, you're only allowed to have 2 hooks, but in these park ponds you can use more hooks. I think it's 3 hooks you're allowed to use, so you can always tie on multiple hooks. Now I use a normal fisherman's knot or improved clinch knot when I tie anything onto my lines, but I don't think the actual knot you use is that important. It's what you have the most confidence in. If you want to use a Palomar knot, go ahead and do that. have a look at the different knots and see what works for you. Fisherman knot works for me because you can use it on any sort of line. Even something as thick as nylon, you can use a fisherman's knot. So for me, that's the go-to knot. But you need to find the knot that works for you. Now at the moment in this particular pond, I've been chasing around some of the little trout I'm seeing, and the way these trout are behaving, I don't think they're going to last very long. Right now it's 98 degrees out here. Yes, we do have some storms rolling in, but it's still rather hot and the water is heating up, and these trout are starting to act funny and they're starting to look funny. And I think that the carp that I'm busy seeing, they're preparing to go into spawn. I think the water temperatures here have finally reached that point where it's a good time for them to start spawning. So even though you can see a lot of carp, if they're spawning, they won't be biting. And this tends to happen a lot earlier, normally around March, April. This year, however, it seems that because the water temperatures are cooler, it's kind of got delayed a bit. So for that reason, I'm going to take my second setup, try out some night crawlers, see if there's any other fish in this area willing to bite while still soaking the carp baits out there. Let's do that for a few hours and see if we get any action. Seeing a lot of movement, probably a fish busy with our pack baits, maybe a little duck messing with our baits, but unless this thing is screaming or completely falling down, we just leave it where it is. Just had some movement on this bobber again. Seeing quite a lot of terrapins in this area. Don't know whether it's just them stealing the baits. Sadly, the other little camera there, it's too hot for that thing. It kept shutting down. But with this amount of action, we'll just leave it for a while. We'll see if that thing starts screaming or not. If we don't get any action on that, just going to rebait it, cast it into a different direction, try and get it away from the little terrapins. Alright, ladies and gents, it was supposed to become rainy but not windy, so the weatherman lied. So I do hope this little microphone does shield some of the wind, but this is why I don't actually go out fishing when it's windy. Even though the fishing can still be good, the wind is terrible for the equipment, and it is supposed to be like this tomorrow as well. Now, why am I talking about tomorrow's weather? Well, at the beginning of this video I said we'll be out here for 2 days trying to find some big carp. And I was thinking it would be a pretty good time to find carp here at Sunset Park, given the time of year. But lo and behold, got out here and we still can catch some trout. And it is for that exact reason that I'm thinking I'm not going to do the 2-day thing. I do believe that these carp are still getting ready for spawn, or are actually busy spawning, so they're not feeding. So right now is not a good time to try and catch them. Rather wait a couple of weeks and try again. So we're putting the carp catch on the shelf for now. We'll return to that a bit later in the summer. What a weird video talking about carp baits and catching trout. But do give me a little thumbs up showing your support for the channel. Consider hitting subscribe if you haven't joined my community already. And feel free to ask any questions down below in the comments. Thank you for watching. Like always, see you next time.